Okay, I don't mean to have a scary robot voice bring us all to attention, but thank you all for joining us. My name is Gabrielle First. I am the, hello everyone. My name is Gabrielle First. I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer of CAP Management. Thank you so much for coming tonight to our native landscaping panel with our lovely panelists who will introduce in just a second. Firstly, I wanted to just go over some housekeeping rules. All of the food and the cups back there are compostable, so you can use the green bins to throw away your trash when you leave, including the food, all compostable. And then bathrooms are just right here across the hall. If you need to step out, please feel free to do so. And then now I will hand it over to some of our panelists to just quickly introduce themselves before we dive in.
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm the maintenance manager of Lotus Outdoors. I've been in the landscape industry for over a decade, just kind of working my way up and really gotten into the sustainability, doing everything native, and just the entire ecological side of things really interests me, and that's kind of what brought me to here. That's just me in a nutshell.
My name is Michelle Simpson. I am the co-owner of Otherworlds Seed Co. I'm an ecological horticulturist and designer. I've been in horticulture for 22 years since I was in preschool. And I worked in high-end residential, golf courses, and public horticulture, and then started kind of a native plant turf replacement box kit and also doing consultation and just general helping people kind of understand the idea of native landscaping.
Thank you. Our third panelist, unfortunately, Morgan Hopkins Crawley, could not be here tonight. She got a stomach bug late last night, so unfortunately, she will not be able to join us. She is with Aurora Water. She had a couple of things she wanted to mention about resources for homeowners at the end of this, which we will still bring up, and as well as just general knowledge about the native landscaping realm, waterwise landscaping, xeric landscaping generally, but I think these guys got us covered. So she did share her email with us, so if y'all have any questions afterwards, you can go ahead and get in contact with her directly if you'd like to know more from an Aurora Water perspective. I wanted to pass around this binder. It is not directly related to what we're talking about today in terms of, like, for example, this was created by the Audubon Society and the Colorado Native Plant Society. It is a native landscaping workbook. You can flip through here and you can see it's a presentation for wildlife ambassadors through the Audubon Society. So it's definitely focused more towards birds and wildlife, but there's a lot of great ideas for native landscaping and native plants in here that you can use in your own garden. So I'll go ahead and pass this around just so people have something to look at if it comes your way. And without further ado, let me check the waiting room one more time, and then we'll go ahead and get started. And I see your question, Judith. Yes, you can get a link to the Audubon document in here that we're passing around in person. Okay, great. So I don't see anyone else online, so I'll go ahead and share my screen again so everyone online can see. All right. This is okay. This is it as needed. Thank you. So I wanted to briefly just introduce this by saying who CAP Management is, what we are, why we're even putting this on today. CAP Management is an HOA management company. So we do property management all throughout the Front Range, even into Breckenridge a little bit, and we are focused in Colorado. I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer. We really want to focus sustainability at the forefront of all of our operations, and that is why we are having these today, to talk to homeowners about how they can incorporate sustainability on their own property without having to break the bank necessarily. This will hopefully be first of many, this kind of series, not always native landscaping and might focus on solar panels or EV charging or what have you, but all sustainability related in a homeowner realm. As I put up here, CAP believes that sustainability should be the future of property management. It doesn't seem to be necessarily that way now, but we really believe in this and we believe in this mission. We're trying to push the industry in this direction. And I think you'll hear similar things from our Blue Lotus Outdoors representative in the landscaping and maintenance as well. And then I wanted to highlight quickly, we are doing sustainability projects at almost half of our properties. This can be anything from LED light fixture replacement to EV charging to native landscaping, assessing whether or not the property is good for solar panel installation, energy benchmarking, all sorts of different things in the property realm. And I wanted to take a second to introduce, we have 3 students from CU Boulder's Masters of the Environment program that are currently working on their capstone project with us until December. So they have a lot to do in these next few months, but I'm so thankful to do it. And I will pass it over to them to sort of talk a little bit about what they're working on.
Hello. Like Gabrielle said, I'm Hugh, Spencer and Caitlin. We are working on a certified green HOA certification program. And this is really something that we want to be as a way for HOAs to both calculate their sustainability, so to speak, and also find ways and paths to move forward with sustainability projects and implementing sustainability within their framework. We currently have this, we will still be working on this for about 6 months, until December, whatever that is. And so currently what we have is we kind of have this pyramid of the different levels that we're looking at. The bottom 2 that are in blue are kind of the enabling factors, community, governance, financials, stuff like that. And then we're breaking it off into 4 different areas that are kind of projects of moving forward, one of which is water management. And of course, landscaping is can be a very big part of managing the water use in any particular property. Thank you. In September, if you are a planner aheader, we are hoping to host a visioning workshop to get a more complete picture of what this will look like, and get a lot of feedback from homeowners, from boards, from sustainability practitioners, anyone we can really get feedback from to make this as robust certification program as possible. So there will be more information on that in the future. If you want to find out more, there is the email that is up there.
Thanks. And I will say too, this recording, this PowerPoint will be available on CAP's website after the fact. So you'll be able to access all this. You'll be able to see this email again and click all the links in this PowerPoint. All right. Without further ado, let's jump into the native landscape part. We have already introduced our lovely speakers, Blue Lotus Outdoors and Otherworlds Seed Co and Aurora Water, who unfortunately couldn't be here tonight. All right, so to set the stage for this presentation, we really wanted to start by talking about the water crisis that is currently afflicting Colorado and all of the West, and is soon to be afflicting much of the United States. This was going to be sort of spoken about by Aurora Water, so I'll just plug in here as I see fit, and then please feel free to fill in any gaps in this form. But yeah, there is a water crisis here in Colorado. Water prices, as you might have already seen, have gone up. They are going to continue to go up. That is something that Morgan says from Aurora Water's perspective. They are already implementing drought measures. They are the only county in Colorado thus far, or I'm sorry, the only municipality in Colorado thus far to declare a state of drought. And we're not necessarily saying that other municipalities are sure to follow in that, but water is going to become a more scarce resource as time goes on. And it will become expensive whether or not there is a drought declaration in place. Conserving water is something we should all be concerned about. It is something that is going to affect every person, every homeowner in Colorado, in the United States. And I will go ahead and pass it over to some of our panelists to talk on this point if you have anything to add about water conservation generally. Michelle, what you've seen maybe in your work working in the community.
Well, since I've worked in public horticulture and municipalities and gardens and things like that, there's pretty good data of like there's support for collection of data, water we're using. So, for example, a park that I worked at that used non-potable water still used 1 million gallons per watering cycle. So that was a night. And until recently, a lot of people were saying it's free water because it was pennies on the dollar and it was non-potable. But the more that resiliency and things like that started like popping up and becoming more involved with policy with municipalities, it was a shocking revelation that people realized like how much water we use, and that was mostly that was turf. Really, that's what I'm talking about. So that's municipalities, but if you put the acreage together of homeowners of just front lawns, it's a huge amount of water, and they're using less water, and they're using in Denver drinking water. So there is no I mean, there are some places in Denver draw the wells, but as we know, those are drastically to an end. So people are starting to realize it, and they realize it just the way we realize everything else, which is starting to cost a lot more money. Then that's what happens. So once you realize that, then I think the door kind of opens and you start realizing that there's more than just money. There's also an ecosystem, and there's also livelihoods, and there's also happiness, and there's also comfort, and there's also what you're like to be home, and all those things start kind of tying together. So weird, scary news, but also I think kind of hopeful that we're able to make these connections.
I really don't have anything. That was great.
Great, thank you. Great, so we will move on to the next one. So this brings us to our question, what is native landscaping and how is it different than what we're referring to as turf or lawns, just as we all kind of know them today? A green lush lawn, you can picture it in your head, is the pinnacle of the American home. And so what we're proposing is something a little bit different than that, that uses way less water, something called native landscaping that can be twice as beautiful. I mean, 1,000 times more beautiful, in my opinion. But what is native landscaping? Michelle, would you mind taking this one? What is native landscaping and how does it use less water and why is it important for homeowners to know?
So native landscaping, it's too bad that Aurora City water because there's like native landscaping, native plants means a lot of different things and it changes, and we have to be, this is like the beginning of some, like you'll hear this a lot, that we have to be flexible and we have to maintain our plasticity about what things mean. It's not a black and white, and the world is not black and white, and it's not going to be that way. It's never been that way. So we just need to knock that off. But so the way that I think of native landscaping, especially when I'm working, I serve mostly the city of Denver. So grew up in Denver, I've lived other places, but I really love the native plants of Denver, which I didn't know until fairly recently, because growing up there were no native plants in Denver. I grew up in horticulture, but I grew up in the classic like Versailles method, which is like the rows of the annuals, and that was from like Francis Bacon, which was crazy. But we trying to get your hands on native plants is somewhat difficult. So we talk about the ecoregion. There's all different kinds of ecoregions. There's many ecoregions. So for me right now, native plants to Denver is a huge ecoregion, which is the Great Plains. So it goes all the way up to Camden from the part of it can even sneak into the arroyos of New Mexico down to northern Mexico. The way that I think of it is if it's a pollinator support plant, which means that if it's a larval host, which means like if a butterfly or a moth lays a egg on it and it eats that, then I consider that part of our greater ecosystem. So luckily with GIS and things like that, like the more tech that we have, we know, and citizen science, we know if certain butterflies or moths have been spotted in the Denver area. So like some California poppies support a Mormon checker spot. So it's native adjacent, but we know that the Mormon checker spot has been spotted in Denver. So I'm like, then that's okay. but I'm ready for when that changes to say, okay, we're not going to plant that anymore. Or, we have to keep on top of things. But they support the ecosystem. They support our native soils. They draw water deep into the soil. It supports our trees. They take not only less water, but especially as we're seeing right now, they're what I call dynamic plants. A really good friend of mine who's an ecologist said, human beings have short memories, but plants have very long memories. So I think the last time it rained this much was in 1965, and then before that, who knows? But the plants, like all the native plants that I planted are gone. They can take, if it keeps doing this, but they're dynamic. So we're not talking about high desert cacti. We're talking about plants from this ecoregion that can take hail and cold and hot and water, and it lends to beauty because it also doesn't stress us out as much. It just adds to it.
One thing I'll add to that too is something that I like to think of with native plants is that they were adapted to live here. They're native to this area. They've learned to deal with the crazy Colorado weather, how it's a little bit unpredictable, but they are adapted to be that way, to use less water. And so I just wanted to add that. Chris, did you have anything?
Just as far, just to kind of go off of what you said, the native plants are those that are adapted to our climate, which is, our weather, as well as how much water actually falls from the sky, and then how cold it gets, and also our soils. One thing that a lot of people don't seem to think about is the aspen tree. That is 100% a Colorado native tree. But you bring it down here into the foothills where we have the heavy alkaline soils, and they just don't do well. They're constantly chlorotic, which means they don't have the capability of bringing up the iron that's in the soil, which, as red as our soil is, you should be able to see we have iron in it. But it's just things like that. You have to look at our ecosystem here in the plains and not necessarily the mountains of Colorado, or the western slope of Colorado. That's going to be completely different native plants. Not all the time, but a good chunk of them.
Great, thank you. And so here are just some examples of water-wise landscaping. And I think Michelle had brought this up earlier. So Aurora Water, Morgan, our representative from Aurora Water, one of the things that their department says a lot is that they don't necessarily only focus on native plants. Yes, native plants perhaps use less water because they, as Chris said, adapted to the climate. They know how much water to use. They're used to how much water falls from the sky. There's a difference between native plants and water-wise generally. Water-wise landscaping is what Aurora Water is really focusing on, trying to convert a lot of those turf lawns to water-wise landscaping more broadly, which can encompass more plants than just native plants. So I wanted to make sure to draw that distinction. But here are some of these water-wise landscapes that Aurora Water has helped put into action. Actually, the students and I took a field trip to Aurora Water not too many weeks ago, and they have a whole demonstration garden of all of their native gardens, all the different ideas. And they're separated into zones. So, one of them is more like a rock garden. One of them is more, as you can see, one of them is more shrubbery or grasses. So there's a lot of cool ideas there. If you're interested in trying to implement some of these, I strongly recommend going and checking it out. So, one of the things, and this is happening, some native landscaping projects are happening at a couple of our cat properties actually right now. And there are challenges associated with native landscaping and changing people's minds from this green lush lawn to more of a native landscaping for your front lawn. And there are challenges in it, separate from sort of the mindset shift. There's also, you need to have a lot more collaboration, communication. This field isn't quite as understood as maybe some of these turf lawns. So that's going to be what we talk about next. And I wanted to turn it over to Chris from sort of a contractor point of view. And in your work experience, how have you seen projects like this play out on the ground? What would you say are some of the big challenges associated with these?
So one of the biggest challenges that I've seen from these projects is not setting the right expectation, time and material wise. Everyone thinks, and it's true in the long term, the native and the water-wise landscapes will be cheaper for you. However, the input that you have to put into a completely native landscape is typically going to be higher, especially within the first 1 to 3 years, even going out into the 3 to 5 year range. And the reason for that is when let's say you're seeding a wildflower bed from fresh, you need to make sure that you are getting the exact right amount of water out there to germinate the seeds and get those starting appropriately without necessarily germinating all the weed seeds. And then once you do have weeds, obviously the sooner you can get to them, the better. But it's rather hard when all you're dealing with is the cotyledon or the beginning leaf of the plant, which a lot of the times looks nothing at all like the rest of the plant's going to look like later on. So you have to have somebody that's very specialized and can look at those all and say, okay, that's a thistle, this is a California poppy or something like that. And so you have the higher involvement there. And so you just need to talk to the client ahead of time and get them to understand this is at minimum a 3-year process. At maximum, we're looking at 5 years, but over the 10-year time span, you are going to save both in maintenance and in your water costs.
Great, thank you.
And what I found helpful, which I was able to kind of fine tune during the pandemic in parks, because people at the beginning, no one was out, and so I got to use my garden system to that. I find that when you're shifting a bed or turf or any area to native, being able to wait and let the seed bank germinate a couple times is super helpful. So it's the opposite of like scrape it, plant it, mulch it, move on, scrape it, plant it, mulch it, move on. Like that is it's how the green industry works, and I understand how to do it a long time. I respect the process, but that is not the process. Like seed bank has just been covered up, and some people thought like if you peel back the turf, the native plants will be there. It's like, no, kochia will be there for sure. Like, you're gonna have bindweed, you're gonna have all these things. They're gonna be there, and you have to know what's perennial, what's not perennial. If you have a state of bindweed, then you need time to get rid of that, and you need to know how to get rid of it. You need to know what's a perennial, what's not a perennial. If you're gonna spray, you need to know what's not gonna be effective with spraying. If you're not gonna spray, you need to know if solarization is an option, or if you need to dig and backfill. Like, these are all things that need to be thought about in a different time frame. And then when you do seed, then you find that we are saying was like, you lay down on the ground and you look at every seed and you're like, is this a thing? Is this a thing? But it's also really fun. Like, I find one of the reasons why I started the seed company They like starting from seed and co-planting with established nursery plants is it activates a little bit faster, but also like there's something very exciting about it. You find that homeowners are like, oh, it's germinating, and it's super exciting, and they get into it, they get invested in it, and then when they get to start to learn what those trouble items are, like a Malva neglecta, which is perennial mallow that people probably know, or it's called a cheese weed or something. But it has like, it's kind of items that are like a little heart shaped and they're super cute.
Yeah.
They're adorable.
Yeah. You're like,
So like, once you know it, it's kind of, it becomes kind of fun, actually. So when you approach it that way, I think that's helpful, but it just kind of enjoy it.
I love what you were saying about communication and collaboration, and I'm wondering if Michelle or Chris, either of you, could talk about the expectations, especially if you're doing this on a community-wide scale, what the difference in communication around how your yard will look, how long it will take. But among the community members, have y'all had any challenges in that regard ever?
Yes, and there's a lot of different, it's also coming from a lot of different places, so there's like classes on like well-behaved meetings, and like, I don't know, I'm like, things are they're not gonna behave the same way, so like using different kind of language and different expectations. And fostering curiosity, but also giving very, very clear direction. People love following, well, I don't love following recipe, but everyone else loves following the recipe, you know, like. They want to know what's to come, if you're really clear about it. I think there's a lot of anxiety behind this. And when you have an entire HOA with a lot of different personalities that are used to being in a room together and have history, things get complicated. So the more you can have clear direction and the more that you can offer support and clear boundaries, just like any healthy relationship, like that leads to success. Yeah.
Thank you. The other thing I wanted to touch on, and before this panel, we had a call just as panelists, and Nicholas was on the call as well, and we talked sort of about how we really believe the future of the industry is heading in this direction. Might not be there quite yet, but I wanted to sort of call on you, Chris, and talk about sort of where your company sits in that as well, and what you see the industry is like today versus what it could look like in the future.
Yeah, so one thing that Blue Lotus Outdoors is really into is innovative technology to increase the capabilities of the landscape industry. From kind of our base level right now is we're getting autonomous robots out, and those are battery operated. That means we have fewer routes that we have to drive around to, lowering our eco effect that way. We're constantly looking into the next update within the irrigation industry, whether that's soil sensors, water flow meters that track whether there's been a break and can shut the system down automatically if there has been a break. Some of them are even smart enough to say, it's that specific zone that has a break. I'm not going to shut down everything. I'm just going to shut down that one area. So it's getting the stuff like that going. And then we do want to push more towards these native landscapes. One thing that's difficult is from a business standpoint, things like annuals. They're a great moneymaker. They are a cash cow for landscape companies, because that's something that we're going out, that it costs thousands of dollars every year to install them, and then they die at the end of the summer, and we're going to come back out the next summer and plant them, and hey, maybe we can get you on some pansies for the fall, and maybe some ranunculus for the spring. It's a great money maker, but at the same time, there's no sustainability in it. And so it's getting, we want to push more towards, if we're planting perennials, we're planting natives, and creating that friendship and that bond that is going to last for 3 to 5 years, and then from there, we want to keep that bond going. Yeah, we're not maintaining the property as often, but You know, maybe we're there once a month just to check out the irrigation, and I think that's a great thing.
Thank you. All right, and on the flip side of that, now we're going to talk about the benefits of native landscaping. Obviously, there are challenges to every one of these projects, but the benefits are they outweigh the costs for sure. And so I wanted to turn it over to Chris or Michelle about some of the many different benefits that this can bring, whether that be water conservation, monetary savings, being renowned as a sustainable community, and wildlife habitat.
Start from the bottom up. Recognition of sustainable community, there's lots of different options for that now between, I think, wildlife sanctuary, it's Audubon. So you can do Audubon, you can do Colorado Native Plant Society, you can do Homegrown National Park, you can do, there's lots of different things. You know, entire communities can be recognized, and I think probably eventually that is going to become more and more important, especially for like you guys are doing. And people like it, like if you want to feel proud. So, you know, I grew up in Denver, grew up in Colorado, and the sense of place, I would say, has always been lacking. And I would go to places where native plants and habitat was intact, and like, what is it? And you know, it wasn't that long ago that I was like, this is what it is. There's no, like, the home is not just the people, it's the animals, it's the plants, it's the way the sky is, it's everything, you know, and it's like missing. Never, and the more, when I changed over a garden in Washington Park to native, like, the people noticed. They didn't know why, but they noticed and they came back, and it was really like a cool experiment, and it worked. It's really, but people, they were like, we do this at my house. I want this at my house, and I want a sign says what I did.
Yeah, yeah, you want the
Yeah,
recognition.
and I want it to be a cool sign, and I want it to be. So wildlife habitat, you know, there was a study that was done in 2018 out of UMass Amherst with the black-capped chickadee that suggested that 94%, we need 94% native plants to support the Indian population.
Wow.
So I tell people, like, for every 100 native plants you plant, you know, you can have 2 non-native. So you can have your, I mean, you can have your peony, you can have whatever, like, also those plants mean something to people. So you don't have to rip everything out if you don't want to, you know, like the rose means something, the peony means something, the hibiscus means something, the nasturtium, like all of those mean something to people and their homesickness too, and that matters. But like making a home for everyone, birds, insects, native bees, 70% are ground dwelling, which means that they need their soil to dig into, which means you can't always just have mulch and rock. So that's another super important thing that people don't realize. And in the plains, there weren't a bunch of trees, so we're not having as many carpenter trees like that. Most of them are plaster trees that live in the ground. Reduced maintenance comes after time, so you have to give it time. There was a client that I talked to the other day, and she was like, but I want it now. And I was like, you're a mom, right? And she was like, yeah, the grandma. And I was like, wouldn't it be weird if when you had your baby, it was 36 years old and you'd see you? You need a baby, and babies are hard, they're complicated, they're messy, they're difficult. So like, remember that. This is a so, but also, and for maintenance too, like for the green industry, people start getting into it, they're gonna want different native plants. Their landscapes are gonna change and shift, so you are gonna have to come back and reseed and plant other things. Trees are gonna go in decline, they're gonna need new trees or more sun options, like, but still, we're still viable in industry for sure. So, and monetary savings, you know, I think that what Blue Lotus is doing with tech is, I think that's gonna be enormous.
So yeah, just to kind of piggyback a little bit off of what you said about the feeling of the native plants. When I'm out there and I'm maintaining a garden that's very manicured, it's, you know, a very manicured English garden. It's like I'm standing in a photograph and there's nothing going on. When I go into a native garden, there is so much going on. I have bees, I have butterflies, I have hummingbirds. You know, I came across a fox the other day. That was pretty awesome. And so it's that dynamic system that exists in there, and like you said as well, the landscape is going to change. You're going to realize, hey, I want a nice little path going through that section of the area because I want to be able to see what's actually going on in that corner of the yard. So that's a great thing with the habitat, reduced maintenance, absolutely. You know, when we're going out there once a month as opposed to once a week, that says a lot between the gas savings, the people savings, time savings. It's a lot, which leads to a lot of monetary savings. Water conservation wise, I'm kind of upset Morgan isn't here for this one, but I did a little bit of looking into, she gave a number of Kentucky bluegrass takes 28 inches worth of water a year. So our natural ecosystem, I believe here in Denver, we're around between 8 and 14 inches of water. When you add it all up, because inches doesn't mean anything to most people, per 1,000 square feet of Kentucky bluegrass, you're using about 625 gallons worth of water, and that's with a system that runs 100% efficiently. With your typical spray head irrigation, you're losing 30 to 50% of the water you're putting out there. That raises it to anywhere from about $750 to $1,000 just based off the inefficiencies of the system. So when you can take out having to water that much, that's another monetary saving that's immense, not to mention the amount of drinking water that now goes back to drinking and cooking and, you know, keeping us alive. So that's kind of my big points here.
And I'll just quickly say Kentucky bluegrass is the kind of grass you'd see on these bright green turf lawns. So that's the comparison. And then I will shamelessly plug for the recognition as a sustainable community. That is exactly what these students here from CU Boulder are working on, is creating a certification framework that would award points to communities, to HOAs that are pursuing projects like this, and would provide recognition if the community itself wants to pursue some sort of native landscaping project. All right, and then the last thing we wanted to talk about is resources for all of you here today. Resources for homeowners to take advantage of some of the incentives that the state, the city, that the county, wherever you might live, some of the things that they're offering. And this was originally going to be covered by a Aurora Water representative, so I have put it on our students now.
So we're just gonna talk about.
Click the button and make sure it's green.
So some of the resources available for homeowners in Colorado. So the Colorado Water Conservation Board, they have a Cash for Grass program, which basically just provides funding for homeowners to do turf replacement projects. As for Denver, they kind of focus more on education and hosting events that will help inform residents more on what native landscaping is and how they can do it, rather than providing lots of rebates and incentives like the city of Aurora. Aurora Water has several different rebates, including the grass replacement incentive program, and they also have an irrigation rebate that just provides a rebate for updating your irrigation system. And then lastly, our team created a resource page, which is just a document that has a bunch of the rebates and incentives that are available for homeowners, and just kind of goes more into depth, but it's all in one spot, so it's less challenging to find them all than it is to go to each individual website. And it also goes into the background of water-wise landscaping and some of the benefits of it. So it's a little more focused on water-wise rather than native, but it definitely provides a lot of good resources.
Yeah, also, we have some local companies that we believe are great and will educate you, provide services, great programs. So we have Otherworlds Seeds Resource Essential, which is a nonprofit, environmental focused nonprofit to help with reducing water, energy, waste. And then High Country Gardens, like a website where you can go in and look at the different designs and kind of choose your own, whatever fits you in your home. So it's just some research we have.
You can hand it to Michelle. Michelle, did you want to talk about your company?
It's flashing.
Oh, here. Let's use it.
So we just launched in January. So we did our first boxes with our just a modular short grass prairie, basically. And it's seeds, a pound of seed and 15-meter plugs. And then I drew a map for everybody, a planting map. So that you can do, it was for 200 square feet and that could fit together depending however many you wanted to do. This year, we were able to, I think we're at 40,000 square feet of native plantings done, so that's super exciting. We're gonna get a kind of brick and mortar area down so that we can have a little nursery that people can come to and have classes, things like that. And then I'm gonna be designing more gardens. We're also gonna be doing some shade gardens, because there's a lot of heavy canopy in Denver. There's like zero canopy and then there's really heavy canopy and there's not a whole lot in between. But the really shaded ones, we're doing some experiments to see how light dynamic a lot of our species are, and they're actually doing pretty well, but we're not sure. So hopefully gonna have 4 new gardens available for next spring. And we're gonna do a fall kit for people to be able to plant also. And shrubs, shrubs are really hard to find, so we're gonna do native shrubs online and you can pick them up. So we'll release that soon. It's owcco.com is our website. And we are at the South Pole Farmers Market through the end of July also. We're kind of off of the offshoot, we're not the main drag, we're off of Florida between Penn and Pearl. And it's me and my business partners who can kind of talk to those people, bringing us pictures of their yards, asking, they're like, what do we do? And since we're kind of on the corner, we have time to like sit and talk with people and we love to hear it.
Did you have anything you wanted to add, Chris?
Yeah, just to add a couple more resources. I do know that Denver Water also does have a rebate program for some of the irrigation parts. You can there's some rebates on different nozzles as well as controllers. And then there's also reach out to your CSU extension agent. They're everywhere and they're free.
That's good. Good to know. And this clip at the bottom of the slide is actually from Otherworlds Seed Company website. So just wanted to sort of shout them out, make sure they knew that you all are aware of them. And then one final thing I wanted to mention before we move into questions is that the Alliance Center, where we're having this today, they actually have a patio garden downstairs outside. And they recently replanted all of that patio with Waterwise landscaping. I'm not sure that much of it has come up quite yet, but this is a great place to see sustainability in action if you wanted to go and take a look at their garden before you head out. And that is the conclusion of our PowerPoint. So I wanted to make sure that everyone here had time to ask questions. I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen so that I can keep an eye on the chat on Zoom. So if anyone has a question, please raise your hand.
Thank you very much. So the governor just signed the Xeriscaping bill to promote sustainability in community associations. If you had Senate Bill 178, maybe, doesn't matter. For this conversation, I'm just curious if you guys have any ideas or if maybe cap management is getting involved with this whole idea that we have to have, 3 different garden designs available that are considered xeric and or native available to our homeowners here soon, or either companies have been involved with something like that, or future plans for it.
Go ahead.
Well, I've just gone through getting a turf replacement approved by an HOA. Like we knew this was coming and they like rewrote all of their bylaws. And then I was like, so again, not every, like, people who know about this and are like tuned in, know, but it's not everybody, so I haven't. The yard that I'm doing that's out in Centennial, they're very excited to be like a showcase for it, but no one else in their community is like, how do we do it? So. You know, and I think that, you know, CAP, but it's already communities are tied into that, so I think that that's super hopeful, but yeah, I mean, most of what I'm doing is one-on-one yards in Denver, it's not an HOA. And that's, I mean, we'll get there, and I think that once more, maybe there's tax incentives or something like that, people will get on board more, you know, like that's what I'm but I don't know. But it's like. Not too many, a lot of people are like, okay, but also the boxwoods, but also, you know, like they just can't. And they're like, but I need to, well, I need to know exactly what it's gonna look like. And I'm like, even if I give you a picture of a cottage garden, you wouldn't know, you still don't know what that's gonna look like, but you don't, so I can't tell you. So I think, and I'm super interested to see how it evolves in the next 5 years.
I have two questions, one for the panelists and one for the students. I start with the panelists. You know, you talked about HOAs and, you know, replacing bluegrass with something more sustainable. Have there been any examples of, like, you know, you went a few steps and they were all excited and they were like, whoa, this is not what I was, you know, envisioning, or, you know, you saw obstacles where you almost like had to, you know, go back to square one. I would be curious about that, if, you know, there are any examples, like, what are kind of the main obstacles to overcome and to really make it successful, or have there been any examples of, you know, shall I say, like, failure? I might be curious about that.
I think for having been in the industry so long, I'm pretty blunt with my customers. So, my mom was a horticulturist, and I remember one time it snowed in June and our customers freaked out, and my mom turned to her and said, the plants don't care how much money you have. And I just remember that, and in a kinder way, maybe, I definitely go through a lot of planning with people, and they're like, they say, but what about the boxwoods? And I'm like, no. And I'm like, it's gonna take a long time, and it may not work. And so usually that's more of like a client vetting. So maybe that's the failure, is that I'm, you know, I'll be like, you're not ready, honestly. And so I break the tie with like a deposit or something like that. I'm like, you're just not ready, and then you are ready to back to me. So I'm very, very specific about what I design for. And with the boxes, it was a way to have people come to me who like, I'm ready. Because I mean, the amount of failures I've had in my career are amazing. You know, like any garden, people are like, this isn't what I wanted. And they're devastated, people get devastated when it's not what they want, and you have to start over. But, and I'm sure that we'll run into it more, like, you know, the more I do it, the more people are gonna be sad, and it's gonna be disappointing and everything, but. Yeah, I think mostly what I say is, you're not ready for this, come back to me in 2 years.
Thank you for that. I like the boxes and people have to come to me. So I have a question for the students to give the panelists a little breathing room here. The model that you guys are developing, is this kind of a binary thing, like I'm sustainable or not, or is it kind of a maturity model, like, hey, you know, you go to like level 1 and you've done this and you've done this well, and you go to like level 2, level 3, and then, you know, the golden dream of level 5. I'm curious about how you design that thing.
Yeah, it's definitely more like that latter one. We definitely don't want it to be a binary thing. You're sustainable or you're not sustainable, just because that's not really how sustainability works. So yeah, it's definitely more like that second one. The reason we wanted to divide it up, because just because you say, or you have low water use, doesn't mean that your energy use is gonna be great, you know? So we definitely want it to be in a way for people to look at the different aspects of their sustainability and where they are with that and how they can improve each of those.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can like that. Yeah, so the image that was up before on the screen, we decided to have it more of a pyramid, to have a solid base before you can even get to your pilot project. For example, a native landscaping project on your property. So yeah, we had it as a pyramid to kind of have a base of your financials, your governance, your community isn't in order. Are you gonna be able to do any project? And then the top was like the choose your own adventure route. After you discover and assess all your different sectors, you can choose, okay, we're gonna go for water. And then that's when your project comes into play. And within those projects, we'll have a silver, gold, and platinum rating. So that's just how advanced or how much effort and time the HOA can put into that project. As we know, like everyone starts at a different place and different resources and things like that. So there are going to be specific levels, but overall, we'd like it to be like a holistic approach.
Is this working? Okay. So I have two questions as well. The first one is that I'm curious as to how you guys are implementing like long-term climatic forecasts in your native landscape planning. Just in terms of like, does that change the type of plants assemblages that you guys are planting, especially the longer term perennial ones?
Short answer is yes. Yes, it does change a lot. In recent years, for the most part, Denver's kind of gone to being more of a zone 7 on the USDA hardiness scale. What that means is basically it's gotten hotter by about 10 degrees. And so with that, you have a lot of more native plants. Some of them can take the heat, some of them not so much. And that's where we have to look for more dynamic plants that can actually take that heat going into the future. But it also somewhat, I guess, opens us up to being able to use other plants. You know, maybe now we can use something that would have been in the desert Southwest, and now we can use it here in Denver. Is that native? Not exactly, but it's still technically water wise, and it's still a nice plant that can actually grow and thrive and give us some beauty.
Yeah, like I would count the desert Southwest as native, so it's like it's on.
Yeah.
And what's your scale? And so that's why I think like the native meant to be the word dynamic. So saying like xeric or water wise, to me, well, I don't really use those words because it's the dynamics isn't that we need. And as for annuals, if we think of annuals as begonias or whatever, like annuals, native annuals is super important. There are native annuals. They reseed, some of them fertilize, some of them more biennial or things like that. But they're plants that, you know, for me, it's the ecosystem. So when you're tracking those birds, where they're coming from, when you're tracking those insects, you know, there's a lot of questions about like forced migration of plants and things like that. And that's what we're thinking about. But, you know, like if we're looking at Northwest Texas, and are those plants going to do well here? Maybe not on Forest Parkway, where there's like a bunch of trees, probably, like that's where Elsie is not gonna like that, but in Ruby Hill, yes, it will like it a lot. So it's kind of like knowing, having people that know plants and knowing what they're gonna do and how they're gonna behave is important, but those plants have already been through a lot. Like I said, the long memory of these plants is they've been through a lot, like that, the short grass prairie, the tall grass prairie, the mid grass prairie is a super dynamic place. So I feel pretty confident, unless it does something super weird like rains forever, which is not in the forecast. You know, a monsoon, like more of like an Arizona style monsoon is what we're looking at. And then really, really hot. So all those plants can take care.
Thank you. The second question that I had is that your talk here understandably focused on HOAs as like a primary clientele. I'm wondering if you guys have any experience with other sorts of clients that aren't necessarily quite as don't have quite as concentrated like a decision-making group. Some things that came to mind were underserved communities of private homeowners, large rental or commercial properties that might have their major decision-making headquartered elsewhere in the country, or like state and local governments that have lots of green infrastructure that is supposed to just address.
Yeah, we are partnering with Denver Park Trust, trying to support the pollinator trail that we're gonna support underserved communities and the most climate effective communities ever. So Blue Hills,Onsea, and Arbor Park. The hardest thing with that is water, you know, like. A lot of those families don't have irrigation, so what's the best way to get things established and how do we like really activate the community? So working with nonprofits or working even with like the rec centers in the neighborhoods, like, that is like a hub, and so getting communities together and there's a lot of community involvement, so that's more like. We like to kind of, we're putting our energy toward that kind of grassroots when we have the energy for it. And then for. Like, you know, we talked about neighborhood associations and just trying to spread the word, make things look beautiful, make the designs as good as possible. Trying to make people know that they have rebate options is really important, and then for developers, you know, like Urban Villages do pretty good work, there's, you know, CAP is really good work, there are companies out there that are doing really good work for bigger buildings. Spurs doing super interesting things, CSU with rooftop and the green roof, so. And I think people are coming together and realizing we're taking away that scarcity mindset that only one person gets to capitalize on this. Like there's so much to do that we all can work together and help each other.
I really like that last point that you made, that it's not about just grabbing what you can get and, you know, going on to the next job. It is about community and bringing it together. We at Blue Lotus, we deal mostly with residential, single family homes, and then we do some commercial properties. But a good bulk of it is dealing with the one-on-one homeowner. And a lot of them, it really just kind of depends, who are they? What are they looking for? Can you give them something that is going to be water wise or xeric or, you know, quote unquote native? But basically, can you give them something that uses less water and still is approving of their nature? And one thing to say for sod is, a lawn is one of the few places that you can have your kids go and run around and have fun in. So we're not saying that the lawn has to 100% die. It's just, let's not have it everywhere. You know, if you have an acre worth of land, that doesn't all need to be green. But let's add some dynamic to it.
That kind of goes into my question. So if you're a representative of a large multifamily buildings with a courtyard, is that something that can be dealt with? I mean, we have 114 homeowners. I'll have to agree to getting rid of the lawn for their kids, so something along those lines, cordoning off a section and help, you know, if there's something that you can, instead of leaving a whole section dirt for 3 to 5 years, is there something that can be done that where you insert a few plants here and there and eventually work your way into something better?
Oh yeah, I mean, that's how I would actually prefer to do it. You know, give some immediate appeal to, yeah, we just took away what looks gorgeous as a nice lawn. And let's put in a couple trees and some ground covers and some lower shrubs. But let's also put in a more dynamic wildflower area off in the corner here. Something else to consider is you can always, on some of the larger multifamilies, put in a playground. Give them something for their kids to have that isn't just, here, go kick your ball around in that lawn. Now they have something that they can play with. Give them a ropes course or something like that. Give them a dog run that way, because one of the biggest things when it comes to lawns are dog patches. And so, you know, especially with multifamilies, it's tough because there are so many voices coming everywhere. But you just have to reassure everyone, look, it's gonna look nice, it's gonna be functional, your kids are gonna love it, you're gonna love it, everybody loves it.
Yeah, and I think that that's on good design too. We have to have good designers that understand the people in place and what's gonna work and where are we sourcing our plants and how we take care of them and how we're setting up this. That's really important. The other thing is accessibility to the wilderness. So think of wilderness as well as mountains, so the wilderness can be in your apartment, you know, like my most important memories are being in the wilderness, which I later found out was syndrome. But you know, like we see, like kids want to be in the wilderness, and that can be a movie deal. That can be, you know, cages. It can be very small. It doesn't have to be big, but it's a winding path through wildflowers and through perennials that they're allowed to touch or they're allowed to not go there is okay. Like bison laid down on those plants. Like, you know, some 6-year-olds are gonna be all right. Feel like no one is.
Quick, I guess just overarching question, so, I speak to many HOAs because I sort of sell our services to homeowner associations, I bring this subject up a lot. And, probably about once a week, I speak with what is, I would say, generally a townhome association built in the 60s, 70s, or 80s, where they install green belts, and it's just incredibly extensive landscaping, sometimes there are ponds, things. And I actually spoke with a woman today on a board who is very distressed about their water bills in Westminster. And I sort of brought this subject up and experienced what I often run into, which is sort of this roadblock, this mental roadblock where they can't quite get their heads wrapped around the idea of doing it, and they still have that sort of stigma. But I guess my question is, I seem to feel like that is beginning to change, having done this sales job for CAP now 3 or 4 years. Do you have a sense of if the general public's mindset and homeowners and residents' mindset is beginning to shift in any significant way in recent years?
Yeah, you're definitely seeing it, but people need a why also, and so they can't, what they see, you know, if they see like a failed greenway somewhere, or if they see, there's all sorts of things, and people prone to being freaked out about stuff too, you know, they're like, is it gonna be messy, is it gonna be big, is it gonna be porcupine, are there gonna be mysterious people living in the tall grass, you know, like, I don't know, man, yeah, no, I don't know, but the other thing is, I recommend, so I worked with a couple HOAs and I was like, start a book club. Here's the 3 books you should read. Listen to them on audio, you know, like. Then come back and let's talk. If you have a why, and if you have lots of other people explaining in different ways, you know, usually I'm like, okay, it's bringing nature home by Lotus Outdoors. It's We Are the Ark by Mary Reynolds, and it was Braving Sweetgrass. Those are the 3. And I'm like, one of these is gonna speak to all of you. And that kind of really helps, and then we gotta talk about it again, and they want to do it, but they don't know what the why is, and they don't have good examples. So, or they're like, oh yeah, the Lori Garden in Chicago, I'm like that. Like I wish, like we'll have our own version of that soon here somewhere, we'll have examples for you, but not yet. So you have to talk about like, you know, being brave and being the people, like you want to be the people that make the change, like you guys can be the ones that are doing this. And once in a while we'll say yes.
I honestly don't have much to add to that. It's tough. It's been tough, but I do see a lot of people, they want to make the change. They feel that it's hotter. They see that it's been raining for way longer than it should be. You know, maybe you're a skier and the last couple of years weren't really that good of a ski season. People notice. It's finding the reason why they notice and connecting with them on that level. And I think we all want to get to a better place.
I want to just be conscious of time. We are a little bit over, but we have one more question just from someone online and it will be recorded. So if you have to head out, feel free to do so. Someone online says, I have a 2-part question. First, how can we increase the appeal of native landscape? I think you kind of already touched on this. And along those same lines, how do we circumvent the politicization of this concept? We see firsthand what's happening with wind, solar, etc. So is there a way to sidestep this?
This isn't political, this is just your yard.
But I feel you, because if anything, you know, so the way for me, I think that, the native landscape. Anyways, he's from Arkansas. Hunters, so Ducks Unlimited is a great community of ecologists that are mostly, I'd say, more kind of like leaning hunter type people. Hunters are super great ecologists generally, because hunting is not good, the ecology is stable. I think also talking about pride of place, this is where you live, this is your home. Like, be proud of the creatures that live here, be proud of like the birds that come here. I took a course, like I'm a certified naturalist with Audubon because I wanted to talk to people about birds, because a lot of different people like birds. That's not politicized. That's maybe the only thing I've seen that's not politicized. So it's like, you know, yeah, it's just your yard, but some people will say. And I don't know, you just have to be like, okay, come see me in 2 years. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean,
And making it beautiful, it is beautiful, like you have to, you know, we were talking earlier and I like, and actually someone, you're like, how do I change my mind about it's beautiful, I don't think so, and it's like, I don't know, read a poem, listen to like, look at some art, like, find beauty in your life, you're craving order, but what you want is freedom, like, let things be beautiful. Like, and have good designers and listen to them, and like, let things be beautiful and move you and be emotional about it.
I love that. Thank you. And I think that wraps up all the questions that we had. And someone dropped this in the chat, so I just wanted to put it out there. For anyone who might be interested, there is a native plant giveaway and swap coming up at Earthlinks on Saturday, June 24th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. hosted by Wild Ones. If anyone is interested, that's in the chat and I can write it down for those of you who attended today. And then we will also grab the names of those book titles. Someone was asking about them, so I'll go ahead and drop those in the chat as well. But thank you all for coming so much. This was great, and feel free to grab the panelists afterwards and ask them all your questions if you have more. And feel free to grab me as well. A couple other cappers are here too. So thank you so much for coming.